Uh, Good evening, all. We're going to start the Planning Commissioners meeting today, Thursday, December 11. We're going to start with the call to order. The roll call, please.
Commissioner Taylor,
Here.
Commissioner McCaverty,
Here.
Commissioner Christian,
Present.
Vice Chair Inga,
Here.
and Chair Magai is absent. We have quorum.
Great. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me. Thank you. Public communications, nothing. Okay. Our next item is the consent calendar,
None either.
nothing. Public hearings, do we have any public hearings for, I think there is an item regarding annual housing element community meeting? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Mr. Paul Samaras. Just kind of our annual update to the Planning Commission and getting the community meeting out word. So I'll go ahead and turn that over to him now.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair, fellow commissioners, for letting me speak to you about the city's housing element. As you know, the city's long-term plan for housing. This is our annual community meeting, and it's intended to communicate with residents about our housing plan and solicit input on how well we're doing and what could we be focusing on. So I'm happy to be here to share a progress report with you and get your feedback and the community's feedback as well. I'll start with some basics about the housing element itself. It is one of 10 elements in the city's general plan. It is a required element, and the state requires that cities update their housing element every 8 years. And the next update for our housing element will occur in 2029, in about 4 years. So we are about halfway through the 8-year housing element planning period. Our housing element contains 4 sections. It has a community profile section that has information on the demographics in the city and an assessment of the current and future needs for housing in El Segundo. The second section deals with constraints to housing, governmental or non-governmental. Governmental being things like regulations or fees or permit processes, and non-governmental constraints being things like market conditions, demand and supply, or housing construction costs, or interest rates, and things of that sort. The third section deals with housing resources, which actually identifies sites where future housing can be accommodated in the city. And then the fourth section is the housing plan. It has a comprehensive strategy and sets goals and has policies and programs to meet those housing goals in the city. To a big extent, our goals have been set for us by the state through the RHNA process, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, that happens once every 8 years. That's when the Department of Housing and Community Development assesses the need for housing statewide, and then it sort of allocates responsibility to regional and then local governments and cities for facilitating the production of that housing. And this slide, as you can see, shows El Segundo's allocation for the period from 2021 to 2029. The city needs to facilitate the construction of 521 new housing units in different sort of income levels, for different income levels. So about 400 of which are supposed to be for below market rate housing for households of lower income levels is what I'm trying to say. As I mentioned, the housing element contains several programs, specifically 11 programs, and then in the next few slides I will briefly go over some of those programs, give you some highlights. The first 2 programs highlighted there have to do with conserving and improving existing housing stock. You probably know this, but about 2/3 of the existing homes in El Segundo are at least 50 years old. Some, and a big proportion are 75 or even 100 years old in the city. So that means that it makes sense to prioritize maintaining that existing housing stock. Don't just focus on building new housing, but preserve what we have. So that's what these first two programs help do. The residential sound insulation program funds sound insulation improvements for homes that are on the northern side of town. And that program is actually administered directly by LAWA, so the city of Los Angeles, as of 2024. That's when LAWA sort of took over and started administering this program. In 2024, the city received applications for 82 permits to treat homes in that part of town. And this year so far, well, as of the end of September, we've received, last year it was 95 permit applications. This year, as of September, it's 82. So we're on track to probably surpass last year's number of permits. Still behind that initial goal that LAWA has set, but it's starting to accelerate a little bit. The other program is the code compliance program, which the city officially calls the Neighborhood Preservation Program or Office, and that operates under our department, the Community Development Department, and it has a one full-time employee currently. This program has been very active the last few years, and up to September, we had 125 new sort of cases opened in the city, and this means violations ranging from things like zoning violations, maintenance, overgrown vegetation, concerns regarding living conditions in some units, or work without permits. The next set of programs have to do with facilitating the construction of new housing, and primarily by removing barriers or adding incentives in the city's regulation for new housing. So a prime example of that is the accessory dwelling units program. The state has placed a great emphasis on promoting or facilitating ADU construction. And in response to that, the city has amended its local regulations several times the last few years. The most recent one being in February of this year, where we amended some regulations regarding the density allowed for ADUs, streamlining the process, adjusting fees, and so forth. We've also established some programs related to ADUs to kind of help things along. For instance, we have an online ADU permit fee calculator on our website. So if a property owner wants to, or is contemplating building an ADU, they can go on our website and, answer a few questions, plug in some numbers, and get a rough estimate of what it would cost to get permits from the city. We also just initiated a new program called the Pre-Approved ADU Plan program. And the concept behind that is to review sort of standard plans for ADUs and make those available for property owners to select from, sort of like a gallery of plans. And then property owners can pick from those plans, and since they've been pre-reviewed by the city, if they select a plan that the city has pre-approved, then that sort of expedites the permit process. This is sort of at its initial stages. The program is at its initial stages. We've just received one application so far, very recently, from a design firm that specializes in ADUs. So they've submitted some ADU sort of concept or standard plans for us to review. We'll go through that review process, and when they're pre-approved, we will post them on the city website, and then property owners can actually kind of go on our webpage and look at, samples of plans, and they can pick one, and then hopefully it'll help things along for them. So all these programs have actually helped out a lot when it comes to ADUs. So The housing element had a original sort of projection or conservative projection on how many ADUs we would permit during this eight-year period, about 120. And so far, we've issued permits for over 100 ADUs, so in the first 4 or 5 years. So we're well on our way to meeting that particular goal in the housing element. Just wanted to touch on program number 6, which is the provision of adequate sites in the city for new housing. That basically means our program to do rezoning to allow higher density residential developments. And we've completed that program. Everything that was in our housing element, we've accomplished so far. And that involves establishing 2 new overlays that allow housing at higher densities. We completed the downtown specific plan update that increased the density of residential development in the downtown area. And then a couple years ago, we approved the Pacific Coast Commons specific plan, and it's a project that I'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation. We also made some progress on program number 9. Actually, earlier this year, we completed the 12th of 12 sort of programmed amendments to the municipal code, all for the purpose of allowing more housing, facilitating the construction, making it easier to get permits, and so forth. And then moving along, the last couple of programs have to do with community outreach. This presentation, the annual housing community meeting, and then several other presentations that we do to various committees and boards are part of this community outreach effort. So we do presentations to the senior board, to the DEI committee, the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club. We do occasional City Hall pop-up events where we talk about City Hall services, including, housing programs and so forth. And all for the purpose of letting our residents know that the city has these programs, it has its goals. It sort of educates people, but also gives them an opportunity to give us feedback or let us know if they have any sort of priorities or concerns, things that we should be working on. We also have, as part of this community outreach program, established a couple of web pages. One is dedicated to the housing element itself, and the other web page has some more general housing issues and resources on it, including our annual reports, for instance, to the state. And then speaking of annual reports, the state of California has placed great emphasis in the last few years on accountability and sort of tracking progress and making sure cities follow through with their housing elements. So every year in March, we prepare a detailed progress report that we submit to HCD to show them how well we're progressing, and it helps us actually keep good track of how well we're doing as well. And that essentially covers what I wanted to talk about as far as the housing element, essentially. There's good news. There's interest in development in town and residential development. There have been some challenges, market conditions, interest rates, housing construction costs have been challenges. So we had a lot of success in the last few years with ADUs, but not a lot of sort of larger scale developments. But we're starting to hear from developers showing interest in multifamily projects and things of that sort. So I wanted to go over a few of those potential projects that developers have expressed interest in. So just going to go over 3 projects. One is the Pacific Coast Commons Specific Plan project. As I mentioned, we adopted a specific plan in 2022. The developer was kind of holding off the last couple of years, but we're starting to hear back from them. So we think that maybe 2026 is when we're going to see some activity with regard to that particular project. the site of the Stickenstein, there's a proposal for a redevelopment there, a mixed-use project. And you're probably familiar or aware of the Grand Kansas project, the multifamily project at the northeast corner of Grand and Kansas. Just briefly, the Pacific Coast Commons project involves 263 units, including 32 units reserved for households of lower income levels. The next couple of projects I just wanted to mention and caution the commission to not deliberate about these projects because these are active applications, so you will be seeing them in the future. But just wanted to let you and the public know that, yeah, there is interest in new development. So we have a proposal at the old Stickenstein site for 80 units, including some affordable units over there on PCH and Palm. At the corner of Grand and Kansas, I mentioned, there's a proposal for a 280-unit multifamily project. And that concludes sort of the housing discussion, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview and mention the El Segundo Vision 2050 effort that is ongoing. This is the city's effort to update its general plan land use element. And for those that don't know, the land use plan and the general plan is similar to the housing element, is the document that has sort of those goals and policies regarding all land uses, not just housing in the city. And it actually has a map that shows the distribution of, the preferred distribution of uses in the city, a map just like this one, our current general plan land use map. And for those that don't know, those areas that are yellowish or brownish are residential zones, and those areas that are red, pink, or purple are typically commercial zones, and the bluish ones are usually industrial zones, just to give people a sense of what the general plan map looks like. We started this process in April. We've done a lot of research and initial phase of community outreach, and we're at the stage of drafting some preliminary alternatives and concept plans for consideration. So we hope in the next couple months we'll have some alternative plans or concepts to present to the community, to the Planning Commission, and then on to City Council, get feedback, refine those concepts, and then come up with a preferred alternative. And then at that point, our CEQA consultant will start that process of evaluating the potential environmental impacts before we go to public hearings for adoption of a new general plan land use element. And we hope to do that by about spring of 2027. And that essentially concludes our presentation. There is a web page for Vision 2050 for anybody that wants to look up information about this effort, and also potentially sign up for email updates if they're interested in finding out what the latest news is. And that concludes our presentation. Be happy to take any questions or comments from you or anybody else listening.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the commissioners?
On ADUs, do you guys still foresee kind of that exponentially going up on ADUs, people applying for ADUs, building them more often? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think we were going to have a very steady, if not increasing, trend for a few years. This year, we've issued permits for, I believe, 22 ADUs as of the end of September. And I think we will just keep going at that rate for a few more years, for sure. Okay. Yes. The state always comes back every year and makes changes to the laws, tweaks, and so forth, and make it easier and easier. So I think that is going to kind of help kind of increase that pace, So I think that at a minimum, we'll keep the same pace, if not see more permits in the next few years.
Any concerns regarding parking, adding so many ADUs, street parking?
We do hear occasionally from residents about, there's ADUs being built and it's affecting on-street parking. there's, and the state law actually prohibits cities from requiring parking for ADUs. So to a large extent, our hands are kind of tied on that particular issue, but we don't see a huge impact from that yet.
I had a question about the sound installation program. Have residents who like qualify, have they been made aware of it, or is it something they have to come to you?
There
Or the
have been
law.
some efforts to do outreach to residents that qualify under the program, but the city is no longer administering this program. So LAWA and the residents sort of interact more directly. If somebody comes to the city and asks questions about it, we will simply refer them to LAWA.
Okay. I was just asking because it said they haven't met their minimum of what they were hoping to get
Yeah, they had some goals,
accomplished.
yeah,
And so
initially.
I wondered, you touched on community outreach, but I wondered how we're either working with them or how they're going about the outreach to
Mm-hmm.
get the people who are eligible to apply for the program.
Yes, well, at a minimum, all these presentations that we make throughout the year, about 4, 5, 6 presentations, we do touch on this program. That's a way for us, the Community Development Department, to get the word out on the RSI program. I believe that LAWA did some direct outreach to residents. I'm not aware of any other efforts.
Yeah, I can expand on that. So we meet with LAWA quarterly. The Public Works Director and myself and the city manager meet with the LAWA team quarterly to go over the settlement agreement terms. There's about 15 to 20 different terms in the settlement agreement, one of which is the RSI program, the funding of the RSI program. So we get regular updates because, as Paul mentioned, they have reabsorbed the responsibility of administering that program. And so about 2 years ago, they started rolling that program back out to the community. There's roughly 1,200 to 1,500 homes left that have not been treated that are eligible. And out of that bucket of folks, there's, I think, half that have not expressed any interest. And LAWA has actually gone door to door. They've gotten to that point where they've done door-to-door noticing and canvassing of the community, because now it's a much smaller bucket of folks. So they've had a few community meetings and workshops. They have a local office on the other side of LAX that they've hosted a few meetings for those residents that are eligible. And then they've also had boots on the ground doing door to door. And we have flyers that they give us that we occasionally bring out, but it's only a very small portion of the larger residential portion of the city, so we don't bring it to all the events. But we help when we can, and sometimes they have Instagrammable or promotional materials that we can push out for them. Right now, we're working on strategizing with them one sort of final push on this over the next year or two. LAWA's going through a process where every 5 years, they have to update the noise contour maps. They're required through the FAA to update that every 5 years, and they're at that or they're approaching that 5-year mark. What they're anticipating, because this has been the trend over the last couple decades, is every 5 years that those contour maps, which establish the noise barriers, shift away from the city, just ever so slightly. And so they're anticipating that those contour maps will shift slightly northwest, I think, if I remember correctly. And so they're doing a big push because it's likely that a lot of the folks that are eligible today, once those contours shift, will no longer be eligible. So they're trying to get people in the queue so that they can take advantage of the current funding allocation through the FAA, because once that's done, and if they've rejected it or if they denied or chosen not to participate, then they will no longer be eligible. But if they get in the queue now, even when the contour maps change, they'll still be able to take advantage of the program because they'll be in that queue. And it's about a 5 to 7 year queue at the moment. They're doing about 100 homes every 6 months or so, or every 3 to 6 months.
So how would you know if you're eligible? Is it something you have to affirmatively, like, I need to go into the city? I mean, I have new construction, but I'm curious because I'm on that side. And we had participated in the prior program, which leads to my second question is, how is this program being received? Are the residents who have it happy with it, unlike the previous iteration, if you're aware?
Anecdotally, most phone calls somehow wind up getting funneled to me, because I think my predecessor and his predecessor helped administer the program. I hear sort of all sides of it. The folks who participated 20+ some odd years ago have a lot of complaints, but most windows start to fail after, or not fail, but they, diminish in their quality, and depending on the wear and tear and use, it's probably time to replace them anyhow after 20 some odd years. But the program as it's currently set up is not set up to replace windows that somebody already took advantage of the program. And that's most of the questions I get are from people who they've extended their warranty, the lifetime or sort of the functional lifetime of the window or sliding glass door or door has been exhausted, and they want to replace it, and they're hoping that the program will fund the replacement, but it does not. That's usually the phone call that I get is questions about warranty and lifetime of the warranties. I have not heard many or much feedback from folks who are participating in the program right now. We probably have close to 200 people who've gone through the last couple years of implementation, and I haven't heard a whole lot of feedback from that. And they have 3 different contractors doing it. I've heard some feedback about the contractors, but they're all working very fast, but I haven't heard about the quality or anything like that.
Is there like a website somebody
Oh, yeah,
could
sorry, the
go
first part of your
into
question.
and just, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. I forgot about the first part. There is a website, and they have a query, and I'll look it up in a second here, unless I can multitask. They have a query box that you can put in your address, and it'll tell you whether you're eligible. I'm assuming you probably were eligible because you participated previously, but I'm imagining they haven't reached out to you directly because they have record that you already took advantage of the program. Yeah. Oh, did you look it up? Yeah. So yeah, if you go to the LAWA.org site, and you'll be able to navigate to, they have a different page dedicated for El Segundo, for Inglewood, for Los Angeles. So you'll be able to navigate to the El Segundo page and put in your address. It's also discoverable on our website. If you go to our website and type in RSI, we also direct you and redirect you to that site as well. Yeah. But I can forward it to you too, so that you can help us disseminate if you want.
Well, that's what I was kind of
Yeah.
thinking. I'm like, I just don't know how many people really know this is, I mean, I've heard rumblings of it, but especially if things are gonna be changing.
Yeah.
I'm cynical and wonder how hard LAWA's really pushing to spend this money.
So I don't have the history. I know that the relationship was a lot different prior to my tenure here so far. But they have had really good success in their participation, and not just El Segundo, with Inglewood and LA as well. They have several hundred in the queue just in the last couple of years. So far, I think it's been okay, but I know historically the relationship wasn't always as friendly or as helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
I have questions, several, in fact. Going back to, if you can go back, Paul, to the slide that has the income buckets and the total of the plan for the 521
Yeah.
units that are in our goal. I should have written down the slide number. It was near the. There it is. Numero cuatro. Excellent. So I guess starting from there, how do we know? Well, Well, I'll start at the very beginning. What happens if we don't build 521 new housing units? What
Yeah,
bad thing happens?
That's kind of the million-dollar question that we get pretty frequently. Well, the state currently, I think, basically looks for a good faith or solid effort on the part of the city, because cities are not responsible for doing the construction themselves. Cities are there to remove barriers and incentivize to the extent that they can. Beyond that, there are things that are beyond this, a city's control. But if a city is actively sort of resisting the requirement, not following through with implementing its programs and code amendments and things of that sort, then there may be consequences from the state, including being sued by the Attorney General's office.
So, in theory, if we got to like 520, we would then roll out all the stuff that we did during the intervening years and say, look, we tried really hard, and it's at 500 instead of 520.
Yes, if I may just add one more thing.
Please.
In the previous period, before this current 8-year period, the city did not meet its obligation for those units that are supposed to be affordable to households below certain incomes. So that, as you can see in that second column that says fifth cycle carryover,
Yes.
was carried over to this 8-year period as an obligation or a goal for the city to meet. So I anticipate that at the end of the 8 years, if we're short, and in particular in those affordable categories, the state will sort of roll the obligation forward to the next planning period.
Right, which leads to my next series of questions. So, how do they know the income levels of people who are getting these new housing?
I think I have a slide for that at the end of the presentation. Let me get that. So this is, I think this is your question. This is the table that is sort of released by LA County every year that establishes those income limits that places you into one of those categories.
Right. So, I put in an application for permit to build a new house. How
Oh,
do you
see.
know where
You're
I
ask-
am?
Are you asking, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question then.
Well, so a new house gets built.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know where to put it in the buckets?
Okay, great. Typically, what happens is a developer will build the units, and they usually will commit to the city, the jurisdiction, that they will reserve certain units for households that qualify according to their income. So they have an agreement with the city to reserve those units for tenants that qualify as either low income, moderate income, or very low, and so forth. So some developers are specialized in affordable housing, so they build 100% affordable, and they offer those units to households that have below certain income levels. In other cases, it may be a for-profit developer, but in order to get, let's say, a density bonus, for instance, they promise to a city that, hey, we will reserve some of the units in our development for households that have income levels below these limits.
And each of those units will then become what's called restricted units, so there'll be covenants and certain legal documents that will say that, hey, these number of units are restricted solely to households that meet these income levels. And then it's the obligation typically of the management company, sometimes in combination with the city and city staff, to go through and making sure that the tenants that qualify or apply for these units meet these income requirements.
Okay. I guess, okay, so we rely on the developers to tell us that the people that they either sell or rent to are low income.
So
Well,
the
there's
manage-
usually a review process or supervisory sort of process, so they have to report to the city, or sometimes cities are involved themselves in the review of the applicant's sort of qualifications, income sort of qualifications.
And so this is loosely related to, if the commission recalls, when we had RSG present the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. And we were talking about the 15% commitment, right? So this is loosely related to that. And part of that
It is.
conversation, remember, then the 15% commitment to people who live or work in El Segundo. The question was, how does it become administered? And at the time, we explained that we currently don't have that infrastructure in place. So generally, there is a government level oversight at a local level, and there are also state level reviews as well. But there's a local level administration where we would have to establish the infrastructure either through a consultant firm like RSG or in-house staff. Some cities are large enough that they have a separate housing division or housing department that manage that. We do not manage that. And so we'd either likely have to onboard staff who would manage that verification process or go through consultants that then get reimbursed back through that arrangement with that developer or property owner. And it's usually an annual audit that happens on a reoccurring basis for all, and they review existing tenants, because sometimes existing tenants get raises or new jobs, and they push themselves out of income brackets, and then you have to remedy that, or they review any new tenants.
In the case of the Pacific Coast Commons project that we approved and I showed you earlier, 32 of those units need to be restricted to households of lower incomes. Well, in the agreement with the developer, the city required a third party to conduct that review of the income qualifications on an annual basis.
Okay, that's helpful, I think. Yeah, it always feels like it's more complicated or easy for us to not meet those buckets. And I mean, when you show that slide, the lowest income buckets are where we have the most carryover. It's the area that I would imagine is the most difficult for us to serve.
That's right, yeah, because there's
So-
fewer affordable units built than,
Right.
market rate units.
So I don't know, I wonder, so my first question was around overall meeting the housing goal, and then what happens if we never meet those two lower income buckets where we already seem to be struggling? How do we get out of that cycle? Because I have no doubt that we're gonna have plenty of housing developed that's gonna hit the middle and above, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, and even with these numbers that we're seeing from some of those larger projects, I don't know where you get the numbers that are gonna catch those two lower income buckets.
Well, there's some cities that have different approaches, and those approaches vary. So some cities pay to actually build housing, So El Segundo built a senior housing facility, 4 decades ago, right? Other cities do something like that. Some cities require developers of multifamily projects to include, affordable units in the mix of units. In our housing element, we did not do that, but what we've done is we've established specific sites, those housing overlays that have very high density rates, that it will make it feasible for developers to include affordable units in the mix. But El Segundo did not go as far as requiring that. And Michael mentioned the affordable housing strategy earlier, and the city has an affordable housing fund. So we're trying to investigate how the city can utilize that particular fund to incentivize or potentially partner with developers to produce affordable units. So We're not there yet, but we're making progress towards that currently.
And if I may also get to part of your question, or maybe take a couple further steps. Currently and historically, there's not an actual penalty. The city can't be penalized, the state can't penalize us for not facilitating the development or not building the number of housing units that are committed in the RENA, or the regional housing allocation numbers that are handed to us. So there's not necessarily a penalty or anything that there's no fine, there's no, there's nothing that of that nature that can be handed to us or from the state. There is, if we don't have an adopted housing element, and if we don't come up with enough strategies to help facilitate or at least incentivize it, and that's the whole housing element process that we went through, is working with HCD, the Housing and Community Development Department, at a state level to create a housing element that had enough programs and policies and regulations that they were okay with, that would incentivize or at least demonstrate that the housing could be built if somebody wanted to. We're not required to actually build it, we just have to demonstrate that it can be done and implement policies that the state believes will help incentivize that. And so Paul gave a couple examples of that, where we've done streamlining, we've deferred fees, we've done all kinds of different things to help incentivize it. But what you do see, and particularly the last 3 cycles of the housing element over the last 16 to 24 years, is that each of the 8-year cycles, the state legislation has ramped up what the city has to commit to get their housing element certified. So historically, cities used to just pick random properties around the city, usually industrial properties or large empty properties that had it in parking lots, and say, look, housing can be built there, and we satisfy the requirement. And for a long time, that was okay. About 16 or more years ago, in the 5th and 6th, or probably the 5th housing element cycle, they started to ramp up the policies and the regulations, or the development standard regulation that cities had to comply with, adopting minimum densities, streamlining in order to help facilitate it. So what we can expect, that if we don't meet the numbers, and this is not just unique to El Segundo, this happens all across the state of California, but if we don't meet the numbers, I'd imagine that the legislation is going to enact additional tools to help incentivize housing production. And I imagine that at some point, they'll use the remainder housing or units that haven't been produced as a metric to dictate what type of policy you might have to implement. They've started to do that now for housing sites that we select today that can be used for housing to satisfy our RENA numbers, will no longer be able to be used in the future. So it gets credited against us, essentially. And so we went through this process where we rezoned a handful of properties. We adopted the 65 units to the acre for the R3 overlay and 75 units to the acre for the commercial overlay or the mixed use overlay. That zoning is going to live on those properties, but the next housing cycle, if they're not redeveloped, we can't use those sites again. But they get to keep the zoning unless, we can't even go back and change it because there's state law that prevents us from downzoning a property. So now it just incrementally builds that inventory of upzoned properties, and the state legislation will likely continue to exercise those types of tools. It's not necessarily a penalty, but definitely a burden on staff and the city as we continue to try and navigate compliance with HCD.
Bringing this back into the discussion about ADUs, how do the ADUs fit into this whole setup here? So if I have a property and my income is whatever it is, we do an ADU split, like how does that change, if anything, the income? Like, do we get credit for a housing unit being created if I do an ADU?
Mm-hmm.
And then what bucket does that get put into?
It will get put in the bucket of market rate housing, so above moderate income levels.
Okay.
Unless the city requires some sort of a restriction or covenant on an ADU that basically says, no, you're gonna rent this ADU to a household of a certain income level.
Paul, do I remember correctly that in this cycle for ADUs, they had a percentage breakdown that we were able to take advantage of to get credit for certain affordability categories?
I'm not sure, not necessarily to take credit, I'm not sure, but there was a study countywide of ADUs and the income levels of those tenants. And that study showed that ADUs, or some of them at least, tend to naturally be more affordable. In other words, they're occupied by households that are of lower income levels. So during the housing element sort of preparation and adoption, we pointed to that study to tell the state that, hey, look, even though we might not have a covenant requiring it to be rented to lower income households, some of those ADUs will naturally go to those types of households. So that sort of earned us some points, but not official credit, I would say, with the HCD.
I suspect that the next cycle, ADUs won't be eligible. There's been several studies that have come out at a state level that less than 50% of ADUs are actually used for housing. So I kind of think that the legislation or HCD will probably eliminate that credit that we get in the future towards contributing towards the RENA numbers. So it'll count towards the overall housing count, but it won't count for anything else.
Wait, what do you mean?
To satisfy RENA or demonstrate that we can, for housing production, or any credit that we might get through unit count.
Right. And so that slide where we have like this pipeline of ADUs wouldn't necessarily be helpful.
It's helpful today.
It's helpful today, yes.
In 2029, it may not
Oh,
be
the
as
next
helpful.
time.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll get it while we can.
Yeah.
And then my last question, sorry, is shifting away from this piece of the topic. What impact, if any, does like recent legislation have on this cycle? Like the governor signed that recent legislation about housing along those transportation corridors or whatever. Does that change anything while we're in this middle of the cycle, or is that something we have to deal with next time?
If somebody takes advantage of that legislation or other state legislation regarding housing, and they propose a housing development that includes affordable units somewhere in the city, then the city would be able to take credit for those affordable units for this current cycle. Yeah, so if developers are interested in taking advantage of those state laws and they build something in the city would get credit for it. It's just that there's a lot of strict criteria.
Yeah,
And not a lot of developers are using those state laws. They are being used, but not extensively and not in El Segundo so far.
yeah, okay. That was it. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Do we take vote to receive and file, or? So we just receive and file the presentation. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item is a new business. Do we have any new business to talk about it? No? Any unfinished business?
No.
Any reports from the Community Development Director?
Nothing off the top of my head other than Eduardo just sent out an email on the Planning Commissioners Academy in April.
Yes, so I got a couple responses. So-
Venus has already registered a couple of you. I know not everybody can always go, but it's available. And it happens annually. This year it's sometimes it flops between Northern and Southern California. This year it's in Anaheim. I think that's the only update we have. Otherwise,
For
Everyone's
the next meeting, though,
Thanksgiving was
we'll
good. Yeah,
have-
go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, for the next meeting, we'll have the selection of the chair.
Oh, yeah.
We weren't able to do it today because, the chair's not here. But for the next one, we do our annual selection of the chair, so we'll get that vote, get ready to vote and get your pencils ready to,
Is
Chair and
the,
vice chair.
chair and vice chair.
is the next meeting gonna be on 2 weeks from today, or
But,
probably not?
exactly, yes. Well, we will not be here in 2 weeks because that would be Christmas Day. So, yes, I love you guys, but I don't want to be spending the Christmas with you guys.
January 8th. Any reports from the commissioners?
Yeah, we can officially.
I was just gonna say, I saw Michael at the Joy Around the World, that the city, the Christmas tree lighting and all the holiday events and the amazing, like, multicultural event that it was with dancers, and it was just really cool. I was volunteering and I happened to see Michael walk by, and I just wanted to commend the city on that. So I thought that was really well done. It seemed to be incredibly well attended, so that was great. And then this Friday night at 6 p.m., this involves schools. If anybody's interested, the choir is having their annual performance. It's my first time going. I know a lot of you don't live here, you want to get out of town, but if you need some cultural live music performance experience for anybody in your family, it's at 6 p.m. and hope to see you there.
I'll be there. Any report from the city attorney?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I would just mention that our office is working on a legislative update. So this is what we do every year. We review the legislation that's come down from Sacramento, and then we put it into a summary. We provide it to staff. When it comes to like planning and zoning issues, we're happy to provide a copy to the planning commission as well, if you'd be interested. And then, of course, if you have any questions about any of that, you can speak with Michael or myself or any staff member. But yeah, we'll provide that to you as soon as we have it. And happy holidays.
Thank you. Well, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.